to the Isn't That Rich podcast. Today, the three of us are talking about a really hot topic right now. It's all about childcare today and the cost of childcare. We've done a lot of research on this and just kind of compared the cost of childcare throughout the United States. And we're pretty surprised about how expensive childcare can be.
It's crazy. I'm not going to lie. Like, I had no idea until we decided to do this episode. I was like, there's no way it costs this much.
Right.
I don't know how anyone does it.
I know. Some places that we're looking, it's 2-3 times the cost of people's mortgage, which is supposed to be your highest expense. And we found out that childcare can at times be the highest expense in people's lives. So
it's really funny. Like Jill a couple weeks ago was calling around all these daycare centers, and Jared and I could hear her just in our office like, oh my gosh, okay, thank you so much for all this information. And so it's so interesting, all the different like price points and tax credits and just different things that we're going to learn about today. So it's really interesting. None of us have kids. So we have kind of like an interesting perspective on it to talk about it. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the reason we kind of started this is my brother just had a baby and they're shopping around for childcare and thinking about that. And I have a lot of my friends are in their 30s and they're starting to have their first child and they're all enlisting in childcare and have done this research. So in a lot of my conversations with them, it's come up. And so I figured it would be a really fun episode to do. Not fun, just like really eye-opening, I guess.
Definitely eye-opening. I'm just still shocked at all the costs that we'll get into today, but I think we can just start off by talking about the different childcare options in America.
Right. And I think the first one that's the most obvious is daycare centers. That's who I got the most information while doing this this research. And so daycare centers, I mean, parents have so many options, but daycare centers are most obvious. You know, you drop your kids off at a licensed daycare center. It's a facility that has like a structured environment from infants all the way up into, you know, kindergarten
Toddlers
age. Even after school, some daycare centers will take your kid after school too. So I think they're probably the most reliable. When you compare different types of childcare, you know, you have nannies. Well, if you only have one person watching your kid every day, what happens if that person gets sick, or what happens if you take your kid to an at-home daycare, right? Then there's a lot more that can happen. So I feel like the most reliable.
Yeah, because they are a business. So, you know, they're always like open and running and
Yeah, they have trained staff. Then your kid gets to interact with other people in their school, right? So they get that social interaction with other children. But I think they're in high demand. So I think a lot of these daycare centers are in really high demand.
Even in Southern Illinois.
What's another type of...
Another one is in home care, which is interesting because I have friends that they do this for their living, where it's like a nanny who comes to the house or even lives or stays at the house and takes care of the kids. I have a friend that actually makes 6 figures doing that.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know how. I mean, I think she does it for like a billionaire. But I'm like, I think you'd have to be in order to like, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But, you know, I think it's another one. But I think it's a more expensive option to have someone in your home taking care of your kids. Yeah. It's a lot.
I was just going to say I have a friend that a couple of years ago when she moved to Nashville, she was a nanny for like a hockey family. And she had like paid time off, vacation, healthcare. Like, I mean, it's serious in other areas, is healthcare. When people do have the money to pay for these types of luxuries, which what we're going to learn today in these episodes, actually childcare is a gigantic luxury in this country, and it's a very expensive one.
Yeah. And then I think the nanny is the most ideal. Like if I were to have a kid, I think it would be so nice to have somebody not only take care of my kid in the home, they have everything they need right there. I know that they do, but also take care of some of the other at-home responsibilities that maybe I can't do throughout the day. So not only are they helping with the kid, but they're helping around the house and take on some more of those responsibilities. So,
but then it's like who can afford that? It's a lot.
Yeah, it's not a common thing. I don't think.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so we've got daycare centers, nannies. You kind of got these people that have daycares at their homes where they'll have multiple children come and some of them won't take babies. Like they just have all these different requirements. So there's just, and then of course we have like the after school centers. So there's different options.
Right.
But they all come at a different price. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think the nanny, which we already talked about, is probably the most expensive, you know, one-on-one care with your child in your home, probably going to cost the most.
Yeah. Well, talking about expensive, Jill, you've been on this kind of journey of talking to a lot of your friends. You say you have like some very established friends, like in their 30s, that live all across the United States, like in Denver and Kansas, and you got to talk to them and ask them like about their childcare. And so I want you to go through a couple of these stories and just tell us like.
Yeah. It was really eye-opening for me because they all kind of live in a city or a suburb of a bigger city. So the first friend I interviewed, she lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, and she was weighing the different costs she has. She just went back to work, I think her baby's about 6 months, went back to work. And so for infant care in Raleigh, North Carolina, she said that the daycare centers price anywhere from $2,350 a month. And so that adds up to like $28,000 a year for a child care, just for one infant, for her baby, her one child. And then some of the other like lower daycare centers, you know, there's the school daycare centers, which are a higher tier. And then there's the middle of the range, and some of the lower daycare centers she was talking to were $400 a week, which added up to still $20,800 a year. So she was looking anywhere from $20,000 a year to, $28,000, so almost $30,000 for daycare centers. She said there's a year-long wait list in Raleigh for some of these expensive, more exclusive places that everyone's trying to get into. She ended up actually hiring a nanny. They're fortunate enough to be able to hire a nanny. So for 4 days a week for a nanny, it's $768 per week for 4 days a week. So that's not even 5 days a week for a nanny. Comes to $39,936 a year for her one child.
So she's paying pretty much like 10 grand more than she would have to go to just the daycare center. But she has the luxury of having to keep her baby at home with a nanny. Right. But that's a salary for a lot of people in America.
That's a good salary. Yeah, absolutely. So you just think Raleigh, North Carolina, that's what you're budgeting for something from $20,000 a year for one kid all the way up to mid-40s, $50,000 if you want a nanny.
Gosh, it's crazy.
That's just crazy. And that's just daycare. It's not like considering like going on a date night and hiring a babysitter or doing something at night where you have to leave, you know?
This
like
is just
that's just daycare.
While you're at work.
Not to mention just the cost of like raising a child, like all of their needs, their food, their clothes, like everything that they need to live. Yeah. Wow.
And I think one of the reasons that they went with a nanny was the wait list was so long, you know, for her to get into this. She's like, had I known, I mean, she's prepared. She's, you know, looking for all this stuff, but the wait list, and then to not even get in, you still forfeit your deposit, which I think was upwards of $500.
That's a lot of money.
Which is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
To not even know if you're getting in or if you found other care during that time and you do get in, you still forfeit that money. So,
right.
Yeah. Just crazy.
It's like we talk about some of these businesses that are like cash cows. I'm thinking the daycare centers are like cash cows. Although I am not saying it's probably easy work because I was an elementary ed major in college and I was like, I can't do this. So don't think it's necessarily an easy business, but definitely they're racking in some cash for sure.
Well, and it's your kid. You want to know that they're in really good hands.
Absolutely.
You don't want to just leave them with anybody, you know?
Right.
It's so important.
So my other friend who I interviewed is a mom of two. She lives in Kansas City, Missouri, and she has a 3-year-old and a daughter that's still considered an infant, and she enlisted them into like a school daycare center. For her infant, she pays $399 a week, and then $295 a week for the 3-year-old, which totals to $688 weekly for childcare. That means their annual child care cost is around $35,700.
Once again, another salary.
Yeah. She said, this is the person I mentioned earlier who said she pays 3 times her mortgage in childcare. So her mortgage is $1,100 a month, and her childcare is definitely 3 times that. Gosh. So pretty eye-opening to see what childcare can be in some of these cities. Mm-hmm. And when you compare cities around the U.S., you look at like Chicago area, Denver, some of these other really big cities where childcare is probably in high demand. You wouldn't think Kansas City is that expensive, but yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So if you think that's steep, you have to hear about my friend that lives, she's, just in the starting phases of planning her family. So not even pregnant yet. Like she lives in Denver. Denver has a 2-year waiting list for any childcare center. Which, I mean, if you're thinking about having a kid in 2 years from now, think about going to look at childcare. I couldn't even fathom that. Like,
no,
I feel like
that's here's my deposit. Right. I don't even know if I can have a child.
2-year wait, like that.
It's like wild.
Wild.
And that's the thing. If you don't know that, then you go to like enroll your kid. And they're like 2 years out. What do you do?
Yeah. And if they get pregnant and have an infant, childcare on average in Denver is about $2,800 a month for infant care when their baby comes, or $33,600 annually for one child. So we mentioned my girlfriend in Kansas City pays $35 for 2. Well, in Denver for 1, you pay $33 annually. So that's not even including the fees or any of the applications or like deposits, right? Yeah. That's just the fee. And now when I was looking at the list of all of the things that this daycare center includes, she's like, well, so that's only from the hour of like 8:30 to 3:00. If you want to do before 8:00 in the morning or 8:30, I said, it's another like $1,300. And if it's after 3:00, like say you work a normal 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, right? A normal business is 8 to 5. If you work that, you have to pay for before care and after care. So it would increase by probably another $5,000. So just thinking about that it's not even your full day. So insane, I think.
And it's interesting too, because we were talking about in our morning meeting with a couple of other coworkers, like, this is the price, but sometimes they'll even have like days that they go on field trips or, like field trips or anything they're going to, and they'll have to pay $50 for the day because they have to rent out the skating rink and you just have to pay for it.
Extracurricular.
Yeah, extracurricular activities. So it's like, that's not even, those are just extra. Oh my gosh. I mean, I just can't imagine the things that you might not even send your kid to. Wild.
I know.
Wild.
I interviewed another friend who lives in Minneapolis. Her daughter is 3 years old, so she's no longer paying for infant care. And she goes 3 days a week, $105 a week for 3 days a week, which totals out to about $16,000 a year. When she was an infant, it was $25 more per day, which totaled out to $20,280 annually. So Minneapolis is a little less crazy, but that was also kind of a suburb that's only 3 days a week. So if she would go full time, it really would be a lot more. Wow. Yeah. So, and that's at a school, and that was a Spanish immersion school, which I thought was kind of cool. So they teach your second language, and she said everything's included in that one. And that's a good point that you brought up, though. When you are doing research for childcare, you need to make sure you know what's included in your price, because there are, like you said, so many add-ons that people could ding you for.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I interviewed I reached out to a lot of, people in Southern Illinois, and I can't wait to get into that too.
Yes.
Yeah, it was really funny when Jill was on the phone with these people. I was like, "Why is she calling daycares?" Like,
she's like a news reporter, like on the hunt. Like
I know. And she's just like, comes out of her office. She's like, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna believe this." We're like, "What's going on?" Yeah, child we don't know about. No.
So the cost of childcare in Southern Illinois, I'm happy to say, is a lot less than these other places or these other cities that I interviewed. But
it still feels like a lot.
It still feels like a lot to me. And especially if you look at things like the cost of living, median household income, things like that. It is a good chunk of change for childcare. So I called every single childcare, like daycare center in Harrisburg, Carterville, Marion, Goreville, all of them, right? So I researched all of them. And everybody for infant care told me the same exact price, which was very interesting.
Yeah,
it was for an infant. It was $285 per week, which amounts to around $14,820 per year.
Yeah, infants are the most expensive group.
Yes. So after you can get them potty trained, your daycare centers are like, okay, we'll charge you less, right? We don't have to change those diapers every day. So, so toddlers aged 2 to 3 years old cost $230 per week in Southern Illinois. So if you have a 2 to 3 year old, they're at about $11,960 per year.
$12,000 a year. That's a side hustle, man.
And that's just for one kid. So there was no breaks. So say you have an infant and a 2-year-old or 3-year-old.
There's not a bundle package?
There's no bundle packages. They're not going to give you
no bundle package for the kids.
No family discount,
which is
right?
Weird, kind of, I think. I mean, I'm just shooting from the hip on that one, but yeah, no discounts.
No discount for families, right?
Gosh.
And then preschoolers age 3 and older paid $200 a week, which amounts to $10,400 per year. Yeah. So, oh my gosh, if you had 3 kids, you're broke.
Yeah, I like to
put them in daycare.
I added it up because I wanted to look at, a lot of our family, there's 3 to 4 kids for every family. Yeah. And so if you were a family with 3 kids under 3 in Southern Illinois, so if you have a toddler and then an 18-month-year-old and a newborn, it is about $41,600 if you lived in Southern Illinois for childcare with 3 kids under 3. I find that number to be pretty shocking too. So we're comparing other areas. Well, we're still pretty high if you add up the annual total.
Right.
Yeah. And there's there's other things, other ways, for besides just daycare centers in Southern Illinois. I was asking about like babysitting. You mentioned like this is just daycare. So if you hire a babysitter, we can talk about what that was too. So typically for one kid in Southern Illinois, it's around $12 an hour for a babysitter. And then for every additional child, they added about $3 onto that. So 12 for your first kid, 15 for your second kid, 18 for 3 kids an hour, and then up from that. So some people were paying from $12 to $25 an hour.
Yeah, we did like Instagram poll, and that was kind of anywhere from 12 to 20 something dollars.
To 25. Yeah, that's what I found. So
I remember one time I babysat all day. One time they literally gave me $40 and I was like, how disrespectful. I did not go back.
No.
Tough business, raising kids is hard. And I think being a daycare center is also hard because children. Yeah.
It's not easy.
I get the cost. Like it's not something that should just be like this free thing, but
yeah. I just think that childcare costs can influence so much in your life. Like it can influence what your family size is, like the timing of having your children. Like I don't want 3 kids under 3 in childcare. So can we afford to do that?
Yeah. And speaking of timing, it's like if there is a wait list, it's like that just throws a whole nother wrench into it. Like, oh, well, we can't have a kid until the daycare center is freed up, or like do we have $500 extra to put down? So it does influence a lot of your life decisions.
Yeah.
But
speaking of wait list, in Southern Illinois, there was a 6 to 12 month wait list.
Most of these that blows my mind.
Daycare centers. Yeah.
That blows my mind. You would not think in our area that there would be a wait list, but
so don't wait till your kid is here. Don't wait till your maternity leave is over to try or close to being over to figure out.
Find out you're pregnant, you have to get on it.
Yeah,
it's wild.
I spoke to some like in-house daycare centers. So say like an independent person has a daycare at their home, they can take like up to 7 people or 7 children. But this particular one I interviewed, she was the only one that really got back to me. She's like, I'm not taking anyone under 18 months. So I don't offer infant care. And she said it was much less than the daycare centers. It was $160 per week, totaling about $7,600 annually. So
I wonder with like these daycare centers and then these in-home daycare centers, like what their cost is for things. So like what type of insurance maybe do they have to have, or I don't know. I can't think of like certain fees, but because it's a liability to have.
Oh, you're running a business.
10 kids to have a business in general, and then to have people's lives in your hands. Like I'm sure they have like some costs associated with running a business like that.
Licensing and keeping up with that stuff. Yeah, for sure. I also, this lady also mentioned that she did receive some financial, I guess, some aid from the government to pay for like the food, to help pay for those costs. So that was interesting too. So she was getting supplement income.
Right, because that's another thing you should probably ask. Do I have to pay for the food every day? Do I have to send them with a lunch? Or
Right.
Another question.
So, which brings me to the next topic, like financial assistance for people.
So there are child care tax benefits, which is super important. I think people that, have kids in childcare need to know about these benefits because it can actually help quite a bit. But there is one called Childcare Assistance Program, which is administered by the Illinois Department of Human Services.
Yeah. And so these families have to be eligible to receive extra funds from the government. And they're evaluated annually. So in order to qualify, you have to submit all your information, your tax information, and you have to qualify every year for this program. And if you go above that income level, you no longer qualify for the tax benefits. Yeah. And it's actually fairly low, the income level. So do you want to kind of go over like what each level is? Because it's kind of eye-opening.
It is eye-opening because, and not to get controversial, but if you go, $1,000 over the household line, like they just take some of your assistance away from you. And so, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but it is interesting to see how people like decide maybe to stay at a certain income level to afford childcare. You know what I mean? So for a one-person household, the maximum annual income limit to qualify for the CCAP is $32,805 a year. So that would be like single income.
Yeah, one person.
One person. So I think of like single moms, if they have a kid that has to, they don't have another person probably to help take care of their kids. So, and if this is their income, then they can qualify for this, which is great. But
I'm sure like in the Chicago suburbs, the cost of childcare probably is that exact amount.
Right. That's what I'm saying. The 32,000. I mean, that's what like the Denver one was for a baby. Right. So,
And if you're making $32,000 a year and childcare for an infant is $14,000 a year,
your income is slashed in half
of it. So it gets eaten up pretty quickly. So how are you affording to live and
for sure
feed yourself and clothe yourself? Yeah, it's high.
But I think what's crazy is even just if you're making slightly a bit more than that, you're now
bumped out.
Yeah.
So if you get a $5,000 raise,
it's so
another conversation.
It's another conversation.
So for a two-person household, the maximum annual income is $44,820. So that's roughly $12,000 more than the one person.
Yeah.
So, and then for a three-person household, it's $55,935 to qualify for the CCAP. And then finally, a four-person household, the maximum annual income limit is $67,500.
Yeah.
So if you are looking for some financial assistance and some tax benefits, that Child Care Assistant Program could be something to look into.
Yeah.
And once again, that is through the Illinois Department of Human Services.
Yeah. And they actually have a calculator on there too. I want to mention this because if you are considering like applying for this assistance, they'll give you exact numbers and you can type all your information and see if you qualify for the assistance before you even waste your time. So go on that website. It's Illinois Department of Human Services, or contact a local child care resource and referral agency.
Yeah.
So there are resources available. It was easy to find out about them online. So
you do have to reapply every single year.
Yes.
So something to keep in mind.
Put it on your calendar.
Put it on your calendar.
All right. Another federal program that provides assistance is the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit. So this credit allows families to claim a portion of their child care expenses when filing federal taxes. Eligible families can claim up to 35% of their child childcare costs, which that's nice too.
I think it's nice. Yeah. It's important to know it's like not refundable. You can't get it back, but it will lower your tax amount when it comes time to pay taxes. So it's not like you're getting this big refund or a big check back, but it will lower the amount you have to pay in taxes come tax time.
Yeah. So if you're paying $6,000 in childcare, you'll be getting about $2,100 in tax credits.
Yeah.
Which it's something.
I'll take it.
It's good.
Yeah, for sure. There's also on that website we talked about earlier, there's scholarships and grants available. You have to be willing, if you're needing support, to go out there and dig for it. Just like scholarships for schools,
I feel like that's the
for your
hardest part, is
kids. Like
digging for it.
there are programs available and grants available by various organizations. Yeah. Especially, you have to look locally. So something that's available in Kansas City is not going to be available here. So you have to look what those programs are locally. Sorry.
That's a lot.
I do feel like these websites though are so hard to navigate. Like
know.
it's literally exhausting.
You're
You're already dealing with like the stress of life and childcare, and then you're like, I'm trying to find an assistant for it, and you don't know which tab on the Illinois Department of whatever to click on.
I know.
Like, while you're working a full-time job and raising an infant and all these things, go to this really difficult website and search for hours to see if you can get tax benefits.
See if our form is even on the website right now, or if we're editing it.
So I know it's probably really discouraging, but I mean, there are benefits, and you just gotta look for them. You gotta do them. They're out there.
You just gotta do it.
Yeah.
We talked about this last option too. Is your employer is a great place to go to if they offer some kind of like flexible spending account, like FSA accounts, to be able to put some money into that pre-tax to pay your childcare out of that. So
definitely check with your employer, see if that is something that they offer, because I will definitely take some pre-tax of my income to pay for some stuff.
Yeah. It's just the reality of what we talked about, the cost of childcare. I mean, it's kind of transformed what used to be a choice of going to work or not into not so much of like the decisions kind of made for you, whether you can afford to pay for childcare or not. A lot of mothers out there are two parent families, one might not have the choice to be able to continue going to work any longer. Like it's kind of made for you.
And having to like make more sacrifices at home.
Definitely.
But, I think like it's hard because I think some people want to stay at home and take care of their kids. But I think there is benefits to working, even if a lot of that income is going towards childcare. You're building up your, I don't know how to word it, but just like your job experience.
People do want to have a career and they don't want to sacrifice staying home with kids and, living on one income just to take care of their children. And that's people's choices.
Yeah.
But it's hard for maybe a mom that does want to stay home with her kids or a dad that wants to stay home with their kids. It's like people do that too. Yeah. And they can't afford it. Yeah. And so,
especially like with retirement and stuff like that, maybe a lot of their income is going towards childcare, but maybe some of it's going towards retirement and these other things that they actually need later down the road in the future. So sometimes working is the best option, but I can see how that can be really conflicting.
I know. And I'm looking at my friends that I interviewed for this podcast episode and just thinking about the age that they're in right now. So in your 30s, that's supposed to be like you're building your income, right? You're really building your wealth. That's a big wealth accumulation year. And then you're spending, if you're starting to have kids later in life where you can actually afford them, well, then majority of that money is going to childcare. And if you don't have family around to help you out, or you don't have, resources available to you, just think of that.
I know. I think about like my eyes are open to it too, because I live here and I have family, friends, like I've grown up in this community, so I have community. But for people that maybe are like, they moved to the city and met somebody and they don't have family, they're like, that's another one of those decisions that's like, you have to think about. Like maybe having a kid is going to affect our life living in New York or wherever you live. And you might have to move back to Southern Illinois, so
close to family to help.
Joe can raise your kids. Like, I don't know.
But I mean, it's a crazy reality that so many people, especially people that grew up here, they moved to a city go to like a nice school, rack up so much college debt, get married, have a baby. And now they have college debt that they're trying to pay off. Now they're having childcare, and grandma and grandpa is so far away that they can't, help take care of them. And this is a reality that I think so many people face. And it's like, how am I going to financially pay for this?
You just made it remind me of the Tiger King. How am I going to financially recover from this?
No, but really, I mean, you just think about it. And with inflation and everything going up, and a lot of times in these cities, just the cost of living can be astronomical.
Yeah. The cost of living is not going down. So
we just keep talking. It's like, what do you do to feel like, I don't know, Jill and I were talking about this morning. It's like, there's all these different components that play into pricing and like our economy and everything going on, and all these decisions you have to make on your own. So it's like, what is the right decision? It's really, you just have to step back and look at your own lifestyle and say like, what do you value? We always go back to that, like with your money, like what do I value? Do I value like my kids staying home with me, and I'm going to cut coupons and maybe get a remote job so I can like be their primary influence in their life? Like, do you value that more, or do you trust that you can go to work and make it work and go after it, and someone else can be their
and that's why it's so important to
want.
like get those tax benefits or grants or look into every possible option. It's a lot of work, but it could help a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too, when there's a stigma, no matter which, as a woman, there's a stigma whether you choose to stay home and take care of your kid and raise your kid, and you step out of the workforce. So you're losing those crucial career years where you're supposed to be doing like this career, you're supposed to be the strong career woman, right? And you're earning all this money and contributing and helping. And there's real value placed on that in a lot of societies, right? And then there's this other thing is like, you miss out on raising your kid. And then you look at that side of things where you want to be the main influence in their life, and you like that's the noble thing to do, right? Is to stay home and take care of your kid. And so finding that balance, it's kind of a lose win-win if you look at it. It's just it's so hard.
This is like funny too. I think that people also think like being a stay-at-home mom, like if you're on TikTok or Reels, like the hashtag stay-at-home mom is like such a luxury to people. And there are stay-at-home moms that have like so much money, and they are stay-at-home moms on a luxury level. But I don't think it's always like this luxurious thing that people grow up saying, like they grow up, I want to be a stay-at-home mom, like, and just they think they're going to be super rich. But a lot of the time, a lot of stay-at-home moms, especially like in our area, because of these costs, they are stay-at-home moms. It's not necessarily because they want to be a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
Or a stay-at-home dad. It's 2024.
But it's a good point, because like if you find somebody and maybe she makes more money, a lot of times I've seen families that the dad's like, well, I'm going to have to stay home and take care of the kids because, we can't afford the child care now. So that happens. I mean, we're seeing more of that in today's society, where the spouse that doesn't make as much money now is the one staying home and taking care of the kid.
It's the new hashtag.
And I think it's interesting too, because in history too, I feel like childcare and caregiving hasn't been seen as the most valued or valuable work. It's the person going to work and earning an income, when in reality, like taking care of your family is one of the most valuable things in your life.
Because look at the cost of caring for children. And so I even think about, we see this at the bank when people get divorced and the woman has stayed home with the kids, like she gets a percentage, in the divorce, because there wasn't, there is money tied to her staying home and doing that type of work.
Right. Oh,
very interesting.
It's definitely a loaded topic for sure. We could go in so many different directions, but this has been eye-opening to me to see just what the costs are here in Southern Illinois. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's important too, like, none of us have kids, but yet I think we're really moved by this topic because we're realizing there's a lot of people that are in like really hard, impossible situations. And I think it's a conversation that everyone needs to be happening about our communities and these kinds of things, how we're voting and all this kind of stuff. Like these are things we should consider, because these are people in our communities that are struggling, and we have to figure out, you know, how to help, or I
like to talk about like, you know, all the systems we have in our life, and they're all man-made if you really think about it. And so it's like, is this one of those things, childcare, that could like actually have like reform to it? I don't know. I haven't given that much thought to it, but it is an interesting thought. Like you're saying, like, what if we did take a deeper look at it? Like, what is the solution?
Yeah. It is kind of interesting. I literally, as we're having this episode, I'm like thinking, like, if we help provide childcare as a nation, would that actually stimulate the economy? Because more people are now working and maybe starting businesses or those kinds of things. It's kind of an interesting concept of like, if that's actually provided for, could it actually stimulate the economy more?
Right. And also,
or not? You know, it's just, it's fascinating.
We don't want the answer to be stop having kids.
Right.
It's not like cut off, you know, no more. We're
right.
not.
Right. Yeah. But I think that's a real thing. I think if you look at how millennials are having fewer children. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. It's not just one influence on that, why they're having fewer children. But I think it has a lot to do with higher cost of living, higher expenses of having kids. Yeah. So I don't know.
Interesting times.
So interesting.
So managing childcare can be very challenging, but there are definitely strategies that you can take to maybe take the weight off your shoulders. And so I would say the first thing is like, don't hesitate to negotiate rates with childcare centers. Maybe they're not going to negotiate it with you, but as Pollyanna Benedict would say at work, like you can always just negotiate. Ask, like, and don't always feel like you have to be committed to a place or long-term care with your children, and know that you can always like switch it up.
Yeah. People are coming up with some really interesting solutions to childcare. I've seen, as I was researching, like people are doing shared care options. So say you live in the same neighborhood, they can hire like a shared nanny for that neighborhood. Like say you live on the same cul-de-sac that with, 4 kids in that cul-de-sac, maybe you share the nanny and they rotate at each person's home, which would be a good option. So pay less for that same like one-on-one care. So something to think about too.
And I know we talked about all the tax benefits that we talked about earlier, so definitely look into those. But another one would be like joining like online groups. I'm sure there's a bunch of like Facebook groups where you can kind of connect with different families going through the same thing, and you may be able to all support and help each other out, which could be really helpful. So getting plugged into your community is
the biggest thing.
So important. And you're not alone. I think a lot of times when people are having that situation, they may feel alone, but I think a lot of people may be in similar positions as you, maybe financially, where you can't really afford that. And these groups support each other. So figure out ways to get plugged in that way.
You know, it's so funny, as I saw the other day, and I don't know where it was, but someone's like, I would literally pay somebody to come over and just sit on my couch and like hold the bottle for my infant while I went upstairs and took a nap for 2 hours. Like, is anybody out there to come over for 2 hours and take care of my kid just so I can get a little nap? And we used to be such a society of community. We were built on community. That's how we were raised. Like you went over to the neighbor to borrow eggs and sugar. And now it's like, I would rather truck 10 miles to town instead of ask my neighbor for help. So I feel like if we could bring some more of that sense of community back, maybe that's the solution. I don't know what it is, but
another crazy thought I'm having, and it's just like, it's a funny, it's just a thing. Like, so Jordan Peterson, he talks about how, like this, phenomenon with families and children. It's like if you have more than 3 kids, you watch, it's called something, but your children start raising each other. Yeah. And so, we're having less and less children. So you're having smaller families, when really, if we could just, and not everyone can have big family, or maybe someone can only have 1 kid, but like the phenomenon of like the oldest kid is like taking care of the younger kids. Like even think about Christine, like, you know, Allie just went away to college, but she's like, you know, Allie drove my boys around and like she was a caregiver in a sense. And so it's like the more kids you have, they take care of the other kids at a certain point in their life. And so it's like all these different things going. So I think that's interesting too, that we're having like less like children to then have these smaller families that.
Like those micro roles within the family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So interesting. Well, this has been enlightening. I feel like there is a lot of information in this and we could go in a million directions, like we said, but yeah, it's been eye-opening for me as someone who does not have kids, researching this has been.
Yeah, definitely eye-opening. And it makes you, for me, like not be so judgmental is not the word, but just understanding people's situations better and like encouraging people to just take a look at their own lives and do what is best for them. Yeah. Not based on what other people are saying or like judging them for whether they're staying home or they want to go be a full-time working mom.
Yeah.
Do what you need to do for your family.
And I don't have a kid, but if I have any advice, I would say don't be afraid to ask for help and get plugged into community and those kinds of things. Don't be like a lone island if you are a single parent or something like that. I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to help, but may not know how to. So
for sure. Yeah. As an aunt, it would be my favorite thing for my brother or my sister to call me up and be like, will you just come take care, or like, I ship the kids off to you for a week and I just need a break. It'd be like a dream come true. So there are those.
And then you give them back and you're like, whoo.
Yeah. Love you. Bye.
Love them.
No.
I agree.
Any last thoughts, you guys?
Those were my last thoughts.
Awesome.
I think this is great.
Well, thanks for chatting. We'll see you guys next week.
So Jill, where do we go from here?
Be sure to check out our show notes for this episode, and also be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.